Hey everyone, Keith here. I hope you've been enjoying these episodes, and if you have, please leave a review on whatever platform you listen to it on. This next conversation is about Laos, and there are two things I want to say up front. First, there'll be some photos of the people we talk about on the website myhomeisspecial.com, so if you want to see the images that go along with the conversation, go check it out. Second, like so many other guests, Tomi talked about his culture in a way that reminded me of the black community. When he talks about Laos time, it reminded me a lot of CPT. I won't say any more than that, but if you know, you know. For now, enjoy the episode. In this episode, we're going to talk about Laos, and I'm going to speak with someone that I know through the BBoy network. He was kind enough to take the call and talk about his home with us. Tomi, welcome to My Home is Special.
Hello, Kate. How are you?
I'm good, man. Hey, can you do me a favor? Let's start with just a quick introduction so people know who they're listening to. Can you share a little bit about yourself for people listening?
I'm Tommy. I'm also known as Tomizuka in the local dancing or b-boy community. I'm more like a former b-boy. I do more of a judging or training, coaching roles right now. So I was born in France and then I was raised from the age of 7 or 8 in Laos. Pretty much spent my whole life in Laos.
Now, Tomi, you did leave for a couple of years for university. Where did you head for that?
I went to Australia actually. I went to studies in Sydney for a few years, and then after that, I came back and started working right away in Laos.
Can you share a little bit about how we know each other from your perspective?
So basically, I know this Lao American b-boy. His name is b-boy Lancer. So he introduced you to us via Instagram.
When did you meet Lancer for the first time? Did you meet him in the US or did you meet him over in Laos?
I met him in Laos. I'm trying to think back. I think it was back in 2016 or 17. He came over to Laos. He wanted to connect with the local community and wanted to hold a workshop with his brother, Aaron. And then I kind of linked up with some people to make it happen. That's how we first met.
Yeah, and I actually had to go back through my photos to figure out when I first met Lancer. And him and Aaron came out for a battle called City versus City back in 2010 in Chicago. And they were part of a 10-person crew from San Diego. And it was one of the first like multi-day huge crews from all over the country battling for the whole weekend. And he had one of my favorite pictures from the weekend. He's like in a freeze. He's got his one leg straight, the other leg he's holding behind him, and he's just straight balanced on his head. And I remember showing
Oh,
people,
yeah.
I remember people seeing that picture being like, whoa, what is he doing? I was like, yo, you got to come to one of these battles with me.
Yeah, he gets pretty mad photos of himself. And yeah, that's pretty much how we met. And then we've been pretty much linking up ever since. Every time he comes to Laos, we like catching up, or sometimes he will be here for judging gigs or even workshop as well.
Yeah, and I think I saw him in 2016, 17, 18 at the Silverback Open with Aaronetic in Philadelphia. And then I think I actually caught up with Lancer at Freestyle Session, Cross One's event in San Diego back in 2019. I was planning to go every year, but then COVID, which changed a lot of plans for a lot of people. So I was hoping we could start off with a little bit more of a general description of Laos. A lot of people listening probably aren't that familiar with Laos. I know I wasn't, but I'm excited to visit for the first time. And I thought maybe we could just talk a little about the culture and what it's like there from your perspective.
Yeah, from my perspective, I've been living here for pretty much all my life. And then what I've kind of noticed is that people here are very laid back, chill. It's very slow pace. You could even say that people are too slow to a certain extent. It's they have this joke that some people they will describe. So it's Laos PDR, and then they would say, "Oh, PDR just stands for Please Don't Rush." That's like a bit of a side joke that people like to throw around. But people here are really laid back. They like to take their time. Even if you try to meet up with a friend, most people will be like, "Okay, let's meet up at 8 p.m. and then you would be there on the spot at 8 p.m., right? In Laos, it's very common to find people that would actually leave their house at 8 p.m. and be like, yeah, I'm on the way. So that means whenever you meet with some people, you could even throw a joke, which is pretty common. You'll be like, okay, are we meeting Laos time or French time?
Right,
French
right.
time will be on the dot, and then Laos will be like extended. People here are quite nice and warm, I would say. I think there's a lot of places to visit, like there's a lot of nature spots as well. And obviously there are a lot of monument in each city.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you about those. I promised people I wouldn't make this a tourism podcast where you just give me
Yeah.
your top five tourist sites so I could go take selfies while I'm there. But I did want to talk about it a little bit because when we talked the first time, you shared a couple of things that were important to you, and you said I should check out while I'm there. Can you share some of those with folks?
So there's the Patusai Monument, or it's literally the Victory Gate. That's based in the Vientiane capital. It's similar to the Arc of Triumph in Paris. And then there's the Golden Stupa, or in Laos it's called Tat Luang. That's also very, very famous. You have the Buddha Park, that's probably 20 minutes away from the city center. That's also worth visiting. They made some renovations recently, so it's very nice now to visit. I would advise to go to the north, which is Luang Prabang city. Like the whole city of itself is a place to visit. So many stuff to do there, activities, nature. There's also a lot of colonial buildings that are still there, wide range of food that you can only find in the north.
And you brought up the colonial buildings and things like that. There's a colonial history in Laos, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's right. From France. So you have a lot of French architecture, you would say. Even in the Lao language, you'll find a lot of words that actually sound like French, or even that were borrowed from the French language.
Of the things you mentioned, the Victory Monument, the Golden Stupa, Buddha Park, are these really just like tourist spots, like when you go to New York and everybody goes to Times Square, or you go to different cities and they all have their thing? Or is it part of everyday life in the country or in the city where people will just spend time at the park or spend time visiting some of these places?
I'd say it's a bit of both. To be honest, I see a lot of locals that still go to the Victory Monument because it's a big space. So some people, they would even go for a jog around there. They would take their kids to watch the fountains and take pictures. So it's quite common to have locals go around and also tourists as well. You find a lot of local people that would maybe go as a almost daily routine to
Mm-hmm.
maybe work out a little bit or even just chill and enjoy their time there.
I wanted to talk about you a little bit because you mentioned the country being really chill a couple of times, and it made me wonder what you do to go chill, like when you have friends visiting, when Lancer and the crew is in town, for example. What do you all do to just
Yeah.
spend time together?
So if we're comparing Laos or even Vientiane capital to a lot of the big cities, like I've been in Australia, obviously. So for me, it's very apparent that because the city is much, much smaller, to go around is also easier. So like let's say you
Right.
finish work at 6 p.m., then you can even go out for a drink right after that. Whereas in Australia, I think I felt like people were kind of rushing back home right after work most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then that would mean that most people will only spend time to chill on the weekends. But in Laos, you can have a drink almost every day and then even go party and go back home. And then that would be just a regular day. So to chill, I think along the Mekong River, there's so many stuff to do. There's a night market. There's also a wide range of bars, restaurant, rooftops. So that is almost the spot to kind of visit, or if you want to chill.
Now, assuming you couldn't go hang out at the bars and the rooftops when you were younger, what were some of the spots that you hit with your friends growing up that I should probably try and visit and see how they are today?
We had this spot where we used to go after training. It was almost like a daily thing where it's actually in the city center. We were practicing not so far from the city center, so I think it's called Center Point Juice Bar, and you can have like smoothies and a bit of street food, papaya salad, and everything. That was pretty much our spot that we would just have to go, almost like a ritual every day after training. I would go and have my apple smoothie daily. That was my ritual. That was what I like to do almost every day, to go and chill with my crewmates. We would go so often that I actually have a very good relation with the owner. It's almost like a family.
Yeah, and did you guys cipher outside the shop or did you practice at a building nearby?
We had a spot, more like a small building, where we were allowed to practice. Ciphering is a big part of the b-boy culture, but in Laos, we didn't have that opportunity to be able to practice in outdoor spot that much because eventually we would get in trouble with the law because they would kind of see it in a negative way where it's like, okay, I see a lot of teenagers kind of gathering, maybe you guys are doing drugs. So there was that part where in maybe in our early years of breaking in Laos, that was a bit of a challenge, I would say.
At the end there, we started to talk about where you went after practice, and I think that's a pretty good way to lead into a little bit about dance. And that's the community that connected us, and it's really a cool global community. It's funny how wherever I go, I just bump into people. My wife and I were in Senegal last year, and we saw some guys ciphering on the street, and I went in and talked to them, and we had mutual friends, like thousands of miles
Yeah.
away from home. And you just, we all knew the same guys, we all knew the same photographers. Can you talk a little bit about your growth as a dancer and on the scene? Is this something that you were doing from a young age, or did you find the culture a little bit later in your journey?
I think I was always into music, dancing ever since I was a kid. Like even back when I was still in France, my mom told me like even when I was 3, 4 years old, I was always dancing. And my dad used to play music at home. He used to make these homemade amplifiers, and then he would just blast music every day. So that was like almost like a daily thing for us to listen to music. But he also introduced me to a lot of good music. Michael Jackson was one of them, and then obviously you see on TV. And I always wanted to mimic Michael Jackson because he seemed, well, he's still one of the coolest people that you ever seen. If growing up, I was more like the shy kid, and I was very introverted, so I didn't really have the courage to dance in front of people. And then as a teenager, there was this new kid that came to our school from France. He was actually a dancer, a b-boy, and then he started to do these free classes and workshop at school. I was too shy to take them, but I think my sister, who was also into dancing, she decided that she would try it out. And then after a few sessions, I decided that I would ask her, but that was like at home, so nobody was seeing us. And then I was like, okay, can you show me what have you learned from the classes? And then she actually did a bit of top rock, and then going down to a baby freeze. I was like, wow, that's so cool. Like, can you teach me? And then she actually teach me one of those foundations. So I would say b-boying kind of came from my sister. There was this spot where it was like a old nightclub where one of the guys' father was the owner, and we would just regroup there from time to time whenever it was available on the afternoons to kind of use the space and practice there.
Better to practice inside than to get harassed by law enforcement for blocking the
Yeah,
sidewalk.
exactly.
Let me
Back then
ask.
we didn't know because it was like our early days, but we had so many instances where we kind of got in trouble with the law just simply for dancing.
How did it grow from there? From those early days where you were too shy to go to a class to practicing with your crew. How did the culture evolve from there? Because I know that you're hosting jams there. I know there's a couple of big events across Asia, whether it's
Yeah,
R16 or Radical Force, which I'm hoping to go
yeah.
to on this trip. But tell me a little bit about where it went from there.
So initially, since it was more like a literal street dance, and then nobody was interested in no sponsors or anything, so we had to do our thing. We were trying to find competitions to join because here there was no local competition. So I think we've had an opportunity to go to Bangkok, and that was our first time where we joined in 2005. That kind of gave us a little taste of, oh, we want to participate to big jams and big events. Back then, Battle of the Year was probably the biggest event.
Yep.
And that was our dream to kind of reach there because watching a lot of videos, we're like, oh, we always dreamed to go to Battle of the Year. So then we were kind of always looking for, okay, how can we perhaps organize Battle of the Years in Laos? It took us a few years, but we did manage to make a name for ourselves. And then we held few events at the National Culture Hall in Vientiane. That's also like the spot back then to organize all the events. We actually managed to sell tickets, actually have a full house. That was one of our proud moments. And then fast forward a few years, that's when we had the opportunity to organize R16 Laos, and then a bit more opportunities to organize different events, qualifiers for Laos. Yeah, that's how it grew.
Yeah, and for those listening, R16 and Battle of the Year are pretty well attended battles that if you can host one of the qualifiers or one of the later rounds in the qualifying for the global finals, you get some of the best dancers in the world coming through. Were you able to do some of those events in Laos at the end of the day or from Red Bull BC1 or something?
National qualifiers, yes. We did have international or world renowned dancers that came to Laos. I would say it's still a proud moment for Laos where you would be able to not only have those superstars of the dancing scene over in Laos, but also be able to share and exchange culture and knowledge with them.
So there were two other things that you mentioned when we caught up that I want to touch on for different reasons. The first was food. Almost every guest that we've had on here that's been away from home for any length of time, they always miss the food. I said, well, you live in a big city, New York or Chicago, you can get your food. And they're like, it's not the same. You can't get the spices, you can't get the ingredients. It's just not the same. And you mentioned a particular dish that you missed when you were away, and it was kind of a big deal. And I'm talking about the papaya salad. What is that? Is
Oh
that like a
yeah.
national dish or is it just Tommy's favorite dish?
I would consider it as a national dish. It's very unique. You could say that some neighboring countries like Thailand have the same dish, but it's not the same in a sense where the Thai version and the Lao version will be pretty different in terms of taste and then the way it's made. It's similar ingredients, but I would say it doesn't come out as the same dish. I prefer the Lao version personally.
And what are the ingredients in there? You mentioned it, but what exactly is papaya salad that makes it unique?
So it's a spicy papaya salad. So they use a lot of chilies, lime, bit of salt and sugar, and then they'll use this fermented fish. This is pretty much the key ingredient that would almost dictate how it would taste. With good fermented fish, you would almost be assured that the dish will be so tasty that you almost make it best. If the fermented fish is not there, or maybe you could say you use other stuff as a substitute, then it would totally taste different. So this was one of the dish that I missed when I was in Australia because you're not allowed to bring food to Australia. So fermented fish was a big no-no, obviously. So what we would use in Australia would probably as a substitute would be fish sauce, but it would give you a different vibe. It would probably still be decent, but it's totally different.
And is this something that you ate growing up, or is it something that your mom made, or that you had a favorite restaurant? Or I guess I'm asking because when I'm there, is there a place I should go get this, or should I just try and knock on somebody's door and see if they can hook me up?
You can find it everywhere, actually. It's quite easy to make at home as well. So I would have it at home at times. There are actually some spots or stands that would just make papaya salad. In most of restaurants, you can find it as well. I've been to Luang Prabang a few months ago, and I must say I still miss the papaya salad that I ate over there. And that was one of the more popular spots that I was advised to try out in Luang Prabang. And then ever since, every time I eat papaya salad in Laos, I would feel like, nah, it can't match up with that one. I have to go back there and have my papaya salad.
I'm definitely looking forward to that. My wife is a big papaya fan, and if you're telling us that it's good, then we're definitely going to hit it while we're there.
Yeah, you should.
The last thing I wanted to talk about as we start to wrap up was something that I'm actually going to miss while I'm there because the timing won't work, but it was a pretty big deal. And when you started talking about it, I got more interested in hearing more and more. And I'm talking about the Lao New Year. And can you
Yeah.
describe what that is and why it's a significant part of the culture there?
So the Lao New Year usually happens every year in mid-April. So it's pretty much the equivalent of the new year that you'll have like on 31st of December, 1st of January for Westerners. And this will kind of mark the new year. As a festive period, they will splash water at each other, and that will translate into washing your bad luck away and bringing you new luck. So that will be a very big tradition in Laos, Thailand, and Cambodia. It's like a 3-day festive period where you have a lot of people going to the temples and then also driving around, even walking around just to get splashed really, and then having some beer and food. It's almost like a must do activity if you visit Laos during April, and then you have to go to Luang Prabang in the north. That's where they have a lot of big traditions that they've been doing for years and years. They'll have actual mascots, and then they'll have the Miss Luang Prabang contestants as well. So there's so many stuff going on there in Luang Prabang during that time.
And is this something that you were able to build a community at when you were away in Australia? Were you able to celebrate this in Australia with other people from Laos, or did you have to come home, or did you just miss it while you were gone?
I'd say it's a bit of a mixed reaction in this one because I actually thought back, and then just because you're in Australia, maybe you once you come to April and then you don't realize people partying or even splashing water or anything, so you feel like you probably forget that it's happening. Nobody talks about the Lao New Year, I would say, except if you're in communities, but it's kind of, I would say, easy to miss it if you're there. Within maybe direct families and relatives, you'd say that we'll still go to the temple, but there's nothing like big water fights where you splash water at each other. I think maybe it's also because in Australia they're very mindful about the water use, and maybe it's considered as a water waste. Growing up, I think in Laos, I had my fair share of going around, sitting at the back of a pickup truck, driving around town, getting splashed during the whole afternoon. Maybe because I felt that's the way to enjoy it. I did miss it a little bit, although because I'm not like a big party guy, that kind of, because I've did it for a few years already, I think that I had my fair share of fun already. I don't think I miss it that much now that I'm older as well.
Thank you again for taking the time. It was a little bit of a long shot as I thought about this project and said, man, I have not met anybody from Laos. And then I remembered Aranetic and Lancer, and I reached out to them and I said, oh, but they've only visited. They didn't grow up there. So they can talk about the culture and the community, but they can't talk about it the same way. And so when I was introduced to you, I really appreciate you responding in the group chat and making the time late at night, early in the morning, just to talk about Laos. And also I'd add, I think you're going to be there, and we're going to adjust our travel plans and come into the capital city for a day or two. And it'd be great to catch up and experience some of your home while we're there.
Yeah, hopefully. My pleasure. And then, thank you also for having me on your podcast. It's really cool.
Thanks for listening to this episode of My Home is Special. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you get future episodes automatically. Go to myhomeisspecial.com for the occasional email update too. That's where links to photo galleries and a few other surprises will live. Be sure to follow KBev Photo on Instagram for behind-the-scenes footage during our journey, and it'll be in the stories. If you just want the photos, go to kbevphoto.com. There's a lot else on there to explore. For now, this is Keith, aka KBev, signing off. Peace.